Gate Tara Samgate Body Ham. Taya Gate Tara Samgate Body
Taya Semja Tamjega to Tojalana Majeba Sanjay Gomar Mochi Tomasha. Teach the Gesega Jovana, Susan the Love. Lavacha, Lavale, Shingle, Shiba, Toga, Tuju Mano, Scottu, Cause of Bava, the Takaja, Lojum Bishop, the Ningi, some of the
So setting our motivation to do whatever we possibly can to attain the fearless state of enlightenment by perfecting all the trainings on the Bodhisattva path. To perfect those trainings in turn, I need to have a very good understanding of what they are, and then to put that understanding into practice. And I need to do that by gaining that information based on an unmistaken presentation and unmistaken text. And so it is with this in mind today that I'm here listening to a mind training teaching with that in mind. And so as we normally begin, we begin with the visualization in the space in front of us of the one who is nature, our own guru, in the aspect of Chen Rezig, be it the 1,000-armed, 1,000-eyed Chen Rezig or any other version of Chen Rezig.
가서 남바 리조스 동안 녀셔발라 안 가서다 같이 뭐 리조스 동안 녀셔라 남바 가서 민내시 남주 유견체 아니 지금 제레스라 아니 데데 라바 제레스라 아니 그 다에 대와 이치게 대와 모두 대와서 되는 주시 맞고 되는 고마셔.
And that all around us are kind, mother, sentient beings, all without exception, and that they are also, although suffering, the individual sufferings relative to their different realms of existence, they have the intelligence of a human being, and so are able to view the figure of Chen Rezig, also that we are visualizing with that faith of pure faith, manifest faith, and the faith of conviction.
대대제스게 에너지가 소다다 지원 점바 투가 홍천은 왔던데 이게 속에 참바 유견체 안라한다랑 더 많이 있으면 탐지를 지원 점바 투가 홍 왔던데 유대게체 왔던데 저다 제레스 투가래 아니 이게 홍텔에 왜서 빠도 매버 촌에 아니 신 초주의 신 남자는 내가 20바 대다 탐지 아니 젠장 20바 온라데 제바 젠장 20바 다 담지 점바 아니 랑게 된 세트 라마 제레스는 파티 아니 올레 온골 아니 가스토르 외바메고 우체 마차 어디로 고마셔.
So then we see how the figure of Chen Rezig in front is marked by Om at the crown, A at the throat, and Hong at the heart center. And similarly, myself and all kind mother sentient beings all around me are marked by Om, A, Hong in the same manner. We then see how light rays emanate from the Hong at the heart center of Chen Rezig, going out in all the 10 directions and inviting all of the wisdom beings from their natural abodes, as well as the empowering deities. And the wisdom beings come and dissolve into the figure of Chen Rezig, and the empowering deities confer empowerment. And through the nectar of empowerment overflowing at the crown, the figure of Amitabha appears.
What did the question? What did the chat? And the article because of the genesis commission and the Takaja Tosa to Tatika, Kobashi, that Yanga Tuba. Mentata Chabasita, Yala Tuba, and the Tacheres around La and then Yangal Metabaso de Takumari, Yangal Casalongo number by San Yangal Metabaso Takumari. And what is Sotakumari? Casana Longo de Yangal Terio Maria. Rota Ina, then the Cheres number. And the Casora Tachi, 2 good number 다 봐도 매번 좀 여봐 이제 되게 되는 게 다가 장량을 뒤쳐도 냥을 밑에 왔다 왜 중국으로 와 냥을 밑에 왔다네 다가 냥을 밑에 왔다 저거 고고에 다 되게 중국으로 와 어떻게 전这city 就把他也把去对的这点看的正确的他们这个大概这甚至个多的两个人没得哇那全国考过呀他这个中国的哇我这这我没得这我这
And so that, and then we, in order to accumulate positive merit and to purify negativities, we can engage in the practices of the 7 limbs in relation to the figure in our merit field and the offering of mandala. And here we, in going through the different limbs of practice through our prostration, paying homage, purifying in negativities, etc. And then we reach that point where we do that limb of requesting the figure not to enter into parinirvana, since the figure of Chenrezig that we are visualizing is an enjoyment body representation. They are not regarded as having entered into parinirvana anyway. And so, nevertheless, we continue with the other limbs of the 7 limbs and the mandala practice. And so, such as, requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma, etc., in order for our sake to be able to accumulate that merit and to purify those obscuring negativities. And so, of course, when and so that when we think about Chenrezig as the emanation body, of which there are countless emanations of Chenrezig out engaging in enlightened activities, and we are doing the 7 limbs in the context of that visualization of Chenrezig, then of course we include the requesting them not to enter into parinirvana limb. And to turn the wheel of Dharma, etc. And of course, then to also visualize the consequence of our sincere practice of offering the 7 limbs and mandala, in that the figure of Chenrezig experiences this bliss, and bliss combining with voidness, and there abiding in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness. To be able to visualize that, to experience that, is said to be extremely auspicious. 단나가서 대 직제 쭉 시바 거 중에로 네 다시 딱라 미년나 쪽라 근데 제가 이나야 서바데 마중바이나 아니 냠레 비다 보면 랑 냠레 다 껴자 주고 요 인상 아니 나라도 다 랑 녀몽 그 샹와도치 아니 더 녀몽 그 샹와도치 아니 제 네데 아니 가서 다지 가서데 녀몽 깨 주저가 다 거에 내체 근데 답에 녀몽 그 춘제 차단 다 된데 지금 네데 지나 당가죠 산제 고마 주고 있어도 다가제 산제 고마 주고 있어도 다고 레라우촌 요 말와 안디가 너무 저대 겁시 자원이는 매겠지
我就觉得他真的觉得他感觉这个让个老于多见的，老于多着老了，你把这真的他感觉这个说法的，他比他过去搞嘛多嘛伊呢，那真的他我就伢们退休之后有的，伢们来捐钱去参与的，我大感觉我的那个恐怕相当一般了，他第一年嘛这个他了，你把军事没想到，刚大大就搞不借钱了，你就我对吧呢？他了那么解释哪里意思？可是你把这个做的现在大概这个我真的讲了，就国外结婚以内的，大概这什么这青年嘛没有以内的，大概这那个我们会想往的忙着把钱呢，俺那这里俺这个随便伢们接退了，俺大概这个够么接个，热多我的是。
And so the last verse completed last week, and the following several verses seem to deal with the issue of patience, of generating patience, and the context of the overall emphasis of this text of the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva is initially to generate the mind of enlightenment, the mind of bodhicitta, and in order then to involve oneself in the practices of the six perfections and so on, and the behaviors, the activities and the attitudes of a bodhisattva. And so it's saying here how important, it's emphasizing how important patience is as one of those practices. And so here saying that, you know, it's important to see how that if we are unable to deal with, for example, criticism, betrayal, and so on, and harsh words, etc., harsh attitudes, that we will fall under the influence of our mental afflictions, no doubt. And if that's the case, also then the other will have fallen on, fall deeper under the influence of mental afflictions, and that does nothing except to keep us involved in cyclic existence. So it's a completely counterproductive kind of attitude to take. It's also pointing out, because of it needing several verses of the 37 to address patience, is showing how it's not easy to perfect these trainings in order to attain that state of enlightenment. And it's on here, it's kind of like really saying that you really need to take care to generate this power in the mind, a really strong kind of a courage and power in the mind. And that comes from seeing the faults of different kinds of conflicting behavior, and also pointing out, you know, the way in which we can generate patience in order to be able to properly respond in those situations.
不是你嘛这个了，他有可不切就是说，他打了你把中山没说了，他彻底on的钱呢，你把没学的在过，那他感觉我自己家当的干什么？可不接吧，现在他可不马接吧，现在他采取了新的习惯了嘛，新的习惯了，他现在你要嘛，现在进门的没有，他现在习惯的，这建设个叫完了，别去当初了呢，建设个叫完了，别去当不出来呢。现在希望在大概的短暂点吧，差不多大。当国外见了，国外马见了，俺这边的新的几个人，俺那国外这边搞了，俺那这个让给矿主的、县党的，俺那马几把见希望人呢，但中你了嘛，让给菜地米子，他没有差不多几个，俺这个人牛毛见吃的他，菜了个把头，他都没有就出来，对，俺那这西边搞了人呢，俺那这个他感觉这个。在硬扎当，他这个手机刚开始用过的话当，但里面把这个他感觉第二边告诉的这个告诉的，国外这个的了，这个是马嘎瓦的差多，这个给没把这他感觉这个超把结巴一那样，就那样，可是当然你把中山刚大就国外这呢，人家往给他人家往给，俺这了 다 되게 다 가져도 정말 년소라 계획 다 내가 참전부 차서 다 강다 기타 상대배 인제 온게 될 미스 받잖아. 아니 뒤뒤가 남땅다 다다가 다다다 소소를 그 고전의 동행료와 뒤에는 다 봐봤었어. 뒤때도 봐봤었어. 좋아? 뒤과는 달라려면 아니 개설라래 있어. 어디가 가지 뒤때도 봐보면 뒤 고쳐봐 소리지. 어떻게 아니 삼로 따와이나 아니 가서다 문에다네 개설이 냠네 다 자주서be 줘발라고 지면은 다 뒤내시 냠네 제국고 돼서 봐. 녀모께 고급자 다 뒤도 녀모께라 다 내가 집을 찾더라. 녀모께 깨주저 맞다. 고급 찾아가 봐. 얘네 뒤 온도 마찬가지네. 아니 세배 냠네를 배주 땅도 맞지 그랬어. 그래서 하도는 어제 다들 전주다 대반을 요 봐. 아니 거 지금 내가 깨봐 얘나 딜라 라와 유네 내가 깨봐래. 라와 맨이 내가 깨봐. 깨봐지. 아니 라와 유다 매 깨봐 깨는데 아니 라와 매봐도 못 쳐온 거 봐. 못 쳐온데 콜라다 저 컨트랙트 교 잡라 인지께서 유서라와 매. 그래서 녀모의 상황도觉得 소소 세마 용거도 아니 샹란 내가 잡아다 따지면서 요거를 봤어. 좋았다. 가서 녀모의 상황 교도 아니 소소 수사지 잡아다 가는 용거도 와. 아니 랑게 세와 시부지 게임에다 보고다 소바 사상라 소바 될 세와 용거도 와. 녀모의 상황 다른 무슨 뉴스라 뭐 통보도 와. 남지 세와 요때 이내 녀모의 상황도 교도 아니 미들라 다 녀바 잡아라 이제. 그 라와 매바 잡아 인사 아니 들었다 그 저기 거저데 그래 다들 제가 소리 문에서는 인지께서 유다 인지께 마도네 코로나다 싸웠네 지금 말했었는 시원하게 뺀내부터 수고도 와.
So, looking at verse number 13, and so even if someone tries to cut off your head when you haven't done the slightest thing wrong, out of compassion, take all his misdeeds upon yourself. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. So here again, we're looking at, whether or not that person, succeeds in cutting off one's head or not. It's kind of saying, looking at the choices of attitude that you can bring to that situation, whether one dies as a result of an attack like this. Looking at the choices that one has and the consequences of those choices, depending on the scenario. So here, for example, when we are able to bear this attack, even if it would cost us our life, we do not lose the essence of the bodhisattva practice, but maintain our compassion, love for our attacker. Then we have gained something. Even though we've lost our life, we have gained something absolutely priceless in that moment, in that time, and that we can carry that on to our future lives. That would inevitably be ours too. On the other hand, if we respond to that attack with anger and still die, then we have suffered a double loss, as it were. In other words, we've lost our life, but we have also lost our equanimity. Really, we have allowed ourselves to fall under the influence of our rage and anger, and that can be extremely dangerous, especially at the time of death. If we're having hatred on our mind at that time, that can be extremely dangerous for us in terms of what kind of life we get in the next rebirth. And so this is the important thing, to make sure on the one hand that we don't react like that and end up in the lower realms, and but rather that we are able to take the attitude, as is recommended in this verse, of taking all his misdeeds upon yourself. And so this has to come from, as it says here, out of compassion. And so this is something that we need to really concentrate on generating through reasoning. So it's kind of like really being able to genuinely say, may all the misdeeds and possible consequences of those misdeeds here arise on me. May I will accept them. I will take them on. And this is also the most effective counter force to the mental afflictions, which in a situation like this are at their most opportunist as well, because they will insert themselves into our thinking if we don't have this kind of real strong power of compassion to be able to interpret the situation in its most positive way. As it says in the Bodhisattva's way of life, when somebody acts like this, we have to ask the question, in other words, when somebody acts in such a negative way or attacked or in a violent way, we have to ask the question, are they under control or not? Are they in control or not? Are they acting out with freedom or not? And the conclusion is that they are not. They are actually completely under the influence of their mental afflictions, which is a kind of madness in itself. And so it's saying because it said, as Shantideva goes on to say, that even those who are under such mad influence like that will sometimes take their own lives, will sometimes take the lives of their wife, their children. We've read about seeing such instances, and that person is kind of like, even in legal terms, saying temporarily insane. And so this is the case we have to look at. These people are not under the kind of control at all. They're completely under the influence of mental afflictions. So the only kind of like logical response from our point of view is to view them as an object of compassion. It has to see them as an object of compassion. And if we, we're not at that stage where we simply can't, call on our compassion in that instance, then we must guarantee that if that's not the case, then we can't ever respond with anger.
Ali pen su neba jawana pa pen kato to tuku mewa ina ya ane samlo gana ne mibari chene an siki meja pa jang chene komshi chane an namshina kali chene tuk tuwa jwa tati tuku marisi ben shaa chana ko rawa mewa chadukudwa taa kazana dike de mozo majiba tabyo mare sebe nyamle majiba tabyo mare ane kien naso washi chegide kien naso washi chegide taa soso nyamle de 그래서 the can tebe kabla 아니 디 kabla 아니 소소 동네 제토마도라 날레기 요인서 다 지금은 장바 지게 간선스는 지금 단단 마도 근데 롱가 두고 전에 두근데 차이요 막 칼리 검네 뭐 다지 두고 마도나 지게 배제 장제라 두고 소고요 다
So these verses here and these kind of words that we really need to kind of like, as it were, really see the meaning behind them, take them to heart, and really kind of endeavor to integrate them into our lives. It's so important. This is what, mind training comes down to. This is what is really important. So that to get to a point where when somebody harms us, as it will inevitably happen at some stage, that we automatically can return benefit for that harm, and that even if we don't get that far, but we can see that when somebody harms us, that it's completely inappropriate to respond or react with anger. That at least we know that we have that much, and so it's kind of like really saying that this is not just a choice of behavior, but it is absolutely essential behavior. If we are ever to train our minds in patience, in developing that level of patience that we can interpret everything through the lens of our own compassion and our own acceptance and understanding. It's very, very important to say that if we can't do that, if we simply can't accept this reasoning, then there really isn't no hope in our lives. This is the veil of suffering. And, we're always going to meet with a complete variety of inconducive conditions, let's say. And so we need to be able to have some means, some training in our minds to be able to deal with these inevitable occurrences for us. And so it's like this process of the taking and giving practice is extremely precious in this regard. And that, we may find that we're faltering at the very beginning, but if we keep it up, we persist, we develop into a habit, then after 5 or 6 years, we can see slowly we start to really come around to being able to handle and respond in this much more enlightened way to the inevitable, misfortunes that we encounter.
그래, 근데 자자바이나 권다 예전에 쇼가 야라운드 꿀롱주드네 간제 가서데 저 오다 저 치원녀바 남친님의 근데 내가 들으셔네 아니 나 근데 그 다리야 지금 가서다 미지직 최지 양조 최주의 국가 주스 가나다 또하다 아니 근데 소수 셈들 담자샤네 아니 지금 잠조다 셈제도 된 전에 딱 간제 저 디리님가데 세통 아니 요제도 다 강발라서 모달라서 또 롱제네 다 셈제 코네 된좀도 봐쇼 용도쇼 생그 솔로 내가 깨봐 있나야 레벨레딩에 페버 좀도 봐도 용쇼 서로 당가자 그래서 꾸노 줘봐 있나 아니 저 내가 깨는지 종에 갑래다 소소대 자티 줘봐 자티 줘도 아니 컨트롤네 사중아 세 마기바네 마기바 쇼총아 좀 물어봐 당분에 traditional member 드링아 코르기게 수가整个有말다 이내야 방면은 좋은데 아니 거기에 저 남자 콘도사야 남자 마기바 잘 모두 영어 되게 좋아 쇼게는 봐 담자샤 니고 점주의 심제 되는지는 왔다 드링이 미세 되게 심제가 되는 좀 쳐도 배주 당기 아니 손내가 깨봐이네 내벨내는 게 파바 쪽이 수식 두자셔봐이네 두자셔벨내는 아니 파바 쪽에게는 코나를 찍고 렌자에다 파바 쪽에 제도가 지금 너네 팬배 쪽도가 지금 있어 담자샤는 좋아이나 아니 네가 강에 채워도 남주 남매 제와다 또 로가 차디라 아니 뒤쪽도 때에 저 전바의 시선 손주나 아니 가장선에 거다 지금 레라들라도 조인도 고치니로
So, for example, it starts and really, in a way, starts and ends with our motivation. Motivations that we set through the night and in the morning to really start to set up our attitude that we bring into the day and try to sustain throughout the day. To kind of remind ourselves, that the fact that in the morning, we must be aware that death is definite, but the time of death is indefinite. So to spur us into really taking the best attitude we can into the day, that there's no time to waste. I mustn't be presumptuous and must be able to do the best I can to take this opportunity to live within the Dharma today. That means really taking care of my mind, taking care of my mental attitude at all moments. And so this means I'm more aware when I'm eating, or drinking, or traveling in the car, and whatever I'm engaging in, I have to really focus on doing so solely for the benefit of sentient beings. And so this is the sort of conversation that we have with ourselves at that time in the morning, setting our motivation, that if I'm met with harm today, I will return benefit. And that, we're not saying that, you have to go out and seek harm, or that it's inevitable that somebody will try to harm you, but that it's so all important to do that preparation beforehand, of the mind to kind of know the likelihood of what might occur, and in that way it gives you an extra power of being able to respond in a more enlightened way. And so, if somebody uses negative words, nasty words towards us, we will again not react to them, but only try to benefit them in response. And that it's so important for us to be clear and to be really precise in a way in our motivation in the morning like this, so that we are and as sincere as we possibly can. In a way, to kind of really make a vow to ourselves in the morning that I will, really take this Dharma opportunity to put my best foot forward in terms of the Dharma and in terms of benefiting sentient beings, and in no way fall under the influence of the mental afflictions. Now, this is a practice, of course, that benefits by persistence and consistency. So if we continuously are able to set our motivation like that each morning and be clear and sincere, then it will have a telling influence over our behavior for sure. And things will become easier. This is the nature of things, because there's nothing that does not become easier through habituation.
아니 건다 제바제 레도나 오 제수이랑 제 뭐제 아니 저거 뭐제는 다가제 저 심지도 산제 공부도 줄을 좋아셔서 뭐제 아니 산이야 마시 쓰는 주나 아니 딘다신 남네 제도 같이 선서 어디도 공부 시작 다가제 저 아니 마디고 존도는 교바께 아니 교선께 아니 이jal라 소바다 동샤라 소바든 또 샤tum체 어디든 어디든 치마이나 아니 소소 교와데다 아니 거기 대소 푸소지는 사운드 아니 네 저까지 아니 레라들라도 줘줘 버와 어다 도나 촌 맞아봐 임바이나 다 가도 이네 다 디카도 되는 먼저 위크니스 간가 먼저 서바 고마도 명으로 위크니스 나라서 위크니스 되려고 서바 고마도 때 아니 레라부터네 아니 지금 가서데 지금 남네 제네 제마도 같이 타마 줘야 그러 타마 줘야 아니 서바의 법마도야 제가 디간의 용되기도 타마치가 디간의 용되기도
And so then at night, and so this is a way to kind of bookend our practice, our motivation at the beginning of the day, and then at night our checking out process and checking in with how we went throughout the day. And so here it's so important to begin with rejoicing in the good moments that we had, how things went well, how I was consistent with the motivation I set, my little vows in the morning, and that dedicating that virtue carefully for the benefit of all sentient beings, and that and then reasserting, asserting ourselves that we will continue in the same vein tomorrow. I will bring my best game to tomorrow as well. And in the same way, we also are very upfront and honest about where we fell down throughout the day, where we did not live up to our motivation. And so here, sincere regret, followed by purification practice, where we confess and purify, with some of the 35 Buddhist practices, engaging in the four opponent powers, etc., and that, and then to make sure again that we are upping our game for the next day. And what's important here is that we are our own vigilant witness to our own behavior, and that we are very clear and sincere, and we're not trying to hide anything, and that we are straightly upfront and honest about our behavior. So that this is the way that we can really, if we are paying attention, that is, if we are mindful to what we're doing, we will see incremental improvements in all of our behaviors over time. If we're not, then we are again putting ourselves at risk, and we're putting ourselves at, under the influence of these adventitious mental afflictions, who will take every opportunity to to wreck our practice and wreck our minds.
说我就能的这个卡对家的当然吧，说说卡对的了 weakness 干嘛伊呢？俺ဒီ卡都得顾客性格的吧，个个来做而已呢，这都顾客性格的。当然俺这俺们这样的，但说是 weakness 干嘛有吧伊呢？就说我心不见了，俺这个都啥钱呢？啥钱吧伊呢？俺说是俺们的不打做的吧。
So we have to kind of really generate this sense of our own witness, and so it's kind of saying when we are kind of like if you have a conflict with somebody, then you bring that to court and so on, and the witness becomes extremely important. And there's so much rides on what the witness reports and so on.
witness 하고 사 내 저도 내 인지도 야구 매매 주 저들 witness 가봐 좋아요나. 그래서 갑자들 가봐네 강에 차 책도나. 안 뒷고급 승부로 와. 좋아. 다 소소를 있네 냠네 가봐네 강에 차 책도 냠네 피다 보면 다. 제 하고 받잖아. 제 빌드업 지야지. witness를 가서 witness는 조사되네. 배나 소소게 배나 파줘라 배나 opposition 라 가봐서는 opposition 강에 책을 얘나 안 뒤에 강에 찾아들네 가봐 좋아이나 뒤도나 안 거의 갑자기 자기로 와.
Yes.
다음에 이제 나랑 속에 냠내 소스 다 냠내 거기는 좋아도 소스 하고 받잖아. 안 돼.
Yeah.
subject.
Yeah. So
weakness. My English may be positive.
We're trying to say whether witness is the best word to use in this instance. That Ken is explaining how, for example, in politics, the opposition, on both sides, they try to focus only on the faults of the opposition, and so they kind of like are somebody who's kind of ready to condemn for the smallest little fault that they see in another. So what Ken is saying, we should bring that attitude to our own fault, and so that we are, exposing our own faults to ourselves, very, very kind of like with extreme prejudice, as it were, that we are like the best witness to our own faults. So we have to be really out ourselves in terms of where we're falling down, where we're not living up to our own motivations and so on. So in this case, this is what we need to do.
다 같이 달라 미년 나서 봐. 동서 잡아 줘봐 전화야. 잠에 신제 라야 되니 제 연대 줘봐 제서 라리니 소리. 다 간제 지금 간제 지금 가서래. 다 오늘 전에 그 지금 라시아 신제 탐절라 편바 주베 지마이나 편바 주게 지마이나 다 지금 소소를 미년 만나서 줘봐 이네야. 아니 뒤 상황도 치네. 아니 파 미년 맞지야. 파식 두자 베주다야 소소마기 맞지 다 되게 아니 라를 내고를 셀을 내고도 다 라시 니가를 내고 있다 다 라시 니가를 받을 가르스나 소소를 미녀마 같이 배치 가서 똥숨 잡아 똥숨스도 다 가자 송가다 수매 칸다 다 동감다 강가를 잡아지 데데다 잡아도 미녀 죄게 요 말와 요 말이 때 얘네야 답에 자체선 참다 심지 탐절을 잡아지 미녀 아니 책도자 좀 뭐봐 이네 죄봐 있나요? 뭐봐 있나요? 다들라 아니 나라도 탐방문에지 소소를 라를 팬도마 타입에 맞게 심지 탐절을 팬도마 다 가르삼을 따는 약을 내라나 아니 잠베 셈전 라야 되니게 아니 잠베 셈게 들라 미녀마 죄가 참라 미녀마 죄네 이 윤대전을 삼다 다 되게 나라 빼 미스게 야고 쉬우죠 가서 가서 봐 고매게 아니 빼 서바 거미에게 다 가자 지금 가서는 다 서바 거미에게 아니 튕게 야고 쉬우 자소스 야고 쉬우 조수 편도 치부 조수스 연대 줘봐 아니 계속 나리 있어 어떤서 왔다 가자 지금 가시 연나 뒤쪽에서 서바 공발라 서베 주 뭐도 저거 있어 주티 여바 인사 아니 서바디 저거 여바 인사 아니 뒤딜라 때네 뒤 서바디 저거 여바 인사 빼면서 진짜 못 찾는 거 좋아 뒤 연나 뒤 연구요래 뒤 중앙인데 서바디 연구요래 뒤 마주나 서바디 연구요 말이야 다 뒤도 서베 유차들 거 제 서베 유차들 하나 편받자다 내가 잡은 거 never chamodo, what, Servali, Serve get out, got a set in a chimata, then to Sanjay Koma to be good to you, not a Pamara. That is a Peme Judicason, she could never sing about you. Mabechen, and a dealer rangi, the Nomo is one of Mata Genet, church of a Twingle Bejutani, and the Serva Commode, and it never did, Serve Jutaba, Pamacharma, until it never has lap to good as well. General, till it never has a Diana, the young good, the man, the young woman, and the content did never is. So good was a general water. Till a general water, the Lali also did the shin and the Cheva, any case Lali is. So that is round down the pentom. Correct, never saw you. Shall sing about it. Round down and it just say, I'm letting the pentom so chatted. Because some things are what matter how good, some things are which time enough. Oh, Koran down there, and I'm letting the pentom so chatted. Some things are when the Dana, because psychological natural, but things are when the Dana.
So then we're looking at verse number 14. Even if someone broadcasts all kinds of unpleasant remarks about you throughout the 3,000 worlds, in return, with a loving mind, speak of his good qualities. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. So again, we're looking at the practice of patience. And it's again, saying here you have two choices of how to react or respond in a situation. So even if someone broadcasts all kinds of unpleasant remarks about you throughout the 3,000 world, and so here we can say that if one reacts by responding with negative words, by counteracting with by entering into conflict with that person, then you have a situation where both of you lose out. Both fallen under the influence of mental affliction, accumulated serious and negative karmas, etc. And you have absolutely wrecked your motivation to abide in the practices of a bodhisattva. And so here, and even if it happens, in all of the people in desire realm, formless realm, should criticize you like this, you have to, see that what is the more beneficial response in a situation like this. And this is to meet the unpleasant remarks with pleasant remarks. And to really see the opportunity here to generate good qualities. And so it's, and then when we go further here, we can see, as is described in the verse, in return for this person disseminating unpleasant remarks about you, in return with a loving mind. So it begins with this sense of seeing the context of what's going on, and you establish a loving mind in speaking of his or her good qualities. So that's the response that is most appropriate. And that's through one's recognizing that this whole scenario is now an opportunity for me to generate patience, and that it's a cause for the generation of patience. And this is kind of very important, that we become astute in being able to perceive what is going on in the scenario, and to see this as an opportunity for patience for me. And so then it's no longer harm in this case, and that one is able to transform something that could have been potentially harmful into something that is a cause for patience, for benefit. And in terms of taking this even a step further, and in the true spirit of the practice of bodhisattvas, when we get to the psychological depth of what's going on, we can see that this person in this context is actually extremely beneficial. And they are, in terms of their kind of losing their mind in order for me to be able to generate patience. That's an extraordinary sacrifice on their part. And so there has to be holding them to be extremely precious. And in that sense, with a loving mind, speaking of their good qualities, one of which right now is there providing me with the perfect conditions to generate a really good quality patience.
학교도 신게 미녀바 줘바디 아니 랑게 그래서 미녀바 줘바디 랑게 랑다 미세는 콘르게와 이나 엔 미녀바 줘바디 뇌스와 아니 미녀바 줘바디 코도다 주스와 다 미녀바 줘바디 랑 콘르 샤와도 마치는 닝제게와 이나 다 미녀바 줘바디 저건데 도다 주마스와 도다 마저부터 아니 지금 내가 차차나 소소를 캡사라서 셈 바꾸자 되더라고 다 미녀바 줘도 마기바 전 대와 이나 아니 장을 내서와 미녀바 줘바디 디 내만이 계자르마다 미녀바 줘바디 랑 미세바 께나 미고도와 미녀바 줘바디 랑 미세바 마기바 쟤네 서바께서나 내게 살아 팽게도와 대자 미녀바 줘바디 내 주레문도와 내가 주대 가서나 랑 미세바 줘바디 레도와 미세바 줘바디 랑라 여러마도 내게 내가 깨겐들 요 말봐 그봐 딱 앉아 지금 군이게 도당 삼었다데 피게 미녀바 줘바레테 미녀바 줘바 짱바기 마기바 요거도와 다 미녀바 줘바디 랑 미세바 줘바 이나 요거도와 다 그거 이제 주의서 랑 미세바 들도와 미세바 들도와 미녀바 줘바디 대외 교회 자고도 동해 교회 네가 자기도와 지금 주샤이면도와 다 대화 다 동해 참아자도 랑라랄리게도 랑기 세바코나 대외 교회 미세바 깨와 이나 그래서 동해 교회도 다 랑이 라발도와 다 디메자 거기 가서래 사이콜로지가 도당한테 심바이나 아니 서바 검투에 교회 되겠지 또 먼저 남편한테 삼당 거 말아 코라긴 돼서 날 노트에 삼당 거 열어 얘네 삼루고 도당 딜라 삼당다 아니 주의 또 소소 라래 됐고
So here, the kind of like the difference in choices here is quite stark, isn't it? And that if we respond to unpleasant remarks as is described here, if we respond with anger, then that everything is lost, and that from our point of view, and furthermore, their objective has been fulfilled. They've succeeded in riling you through their unpleasant remarks, and so you just see the full extent of that loss, of that sort of kind of degenerate response in one way, and that's kind of like and as it says Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva's way of life, if it's not, if kind of like if we respond in that way, then it's going to lead to this inevitable result. If we respond in a different way, we have a different consequence. And so this is what's saying here, to make sure that we see not only the possibility, but it should be the inevitability of a benefit arising from this kind of harm. and to see that. And so we see, in fact, that the harm is a cause for my being able to generate patients, and that and so this is it's kind of like really knowing that it's up to us, it's in my hands. I have control here. This scene can have two possible outcomes: that I will have benefited through generating patients, and indeed the other person may be benefited too by my being able to speak of their good qualities, or it will be a disastrous, conflicting situation for both of us. And that this is what we're talking about in this kind of mind training. We delve into kind of the more kind of subtle and deeper, the psychological point of view, in order to familiarize ourselves to the benefits of patience. And in this sense, we take away our normal reaction of, seeing ourselves as blameless, as saying it's not my fault, And so this is kind of saying that we kind of are then really entering into a kind of reality of the situation, saying, here I'm taking the wiser option for benefit not only towards myself, but for the situation in general and for this particular person in particular.
다 연대 쪽 맞게서라지 다 근데 된데게 가서 수 미니마 줘봐도 소소 세베 냠래를 배주 탕 도겐게 안다 단위 전부 솔라다 오늘도네 연대 주사 유차로 와 딜레 때네 아니 단위 전부 대 가서 세베 냠래 제도도 왔대 오늘 딜레 때는 소바게 두고 요바 인사 다 빠지 무슨 차도 와 안디 연대 줘발라 강에 요 말와 다 강에 요 말 가서나 디 준내밖에 봐대 아니 지금 소소게 편발을 렌토바 인자 와다 지역도 다들 이제 뭐저 가서 제마다 시신의 손에 아니 컨트리 샤워도 마다나 아니 참사가리 유메 차기도 와다 원데 된듯이 다들 이제 이나야 다 개치슈데 컨트마게스는 지금 도자려도 남자 컨트마게가 차요 말때 이나야 컨트로서 당부기가 당부 마디 시시 차기로 근데 전주 지날 컨트로가 세르스 마기바 용데 지금 도자 샤바이나 지금 솔네바게 와이나 아니 얘들아 아니 세 마디와 중거스 마기바지 오다 디가로 삽자 지고고요 그래서 디가로 거기 점제 빼먹고 된 거래 가서는 가서다 컨트롤 강가를 가서 냠미요 봐 컨트롤사도 그래서 지금 도자를 하는 거를 아니 점제 먹고 사네 아니 지금 요거도 와 아니 뭐 가자 지금 미먹고 맨날 지금 미먹고 길에 시에서 삼삼다 아니 지금 excuse 먹고도 와 미먹고 맨날 기대 도자시나 어떻게 이제 미먹고 길에 랍소 나 가마 소스가 다 먹고 열어 다 가자 아니 점제 먹고서 되고 살지 말에 살 먹고 했으면서 다 근데 점제 먹고서 그 이 컨트롤가 세 차기고 점제 들라 때는 아니 컨트롤 야패한 거다 다 근데 그 삼로 마땅 왔잖아 다 이거 당가 삽삽 지고래 삽삽 맞제마이나 다디 컨트롤가 세 패두고 다 마이키반 차고도 제가 되게 점제 삼로 땅와 점제 양당바 맞제마 참 점제 다 가자 컨트롤 숙체다 줘야 콜라 삼로 땅 와는 게 너게 도 삼네 아니 이 점제 뒤따라 삼로 마땅 왔잖아 아니 쇠배 패여다 컨트롤 님이다 뒤돌아 삼로다 안 학교도 당에 삽삽 맞제나 다다 컨트롤가 세 패기도 컨트롤 니바체도 주고도 뒤자와이나 라레 너거를 셀레 너거를 어떻게 lungu 말이 삼네 아니 지 숙초도 다 해시 숙초도 다 아니 소박 범위에 아니 천재도 숙체다 아니 당연히说的 라와 유네 제와 라와 메네 제와 된게 제와 제라 소바 아니 다가는 지금 다 지금 가서데 뒤중나 뒤게 요르스다 가자 지금 너가 깨는 좋아하다 지금 견주 지금 좋아 이바이나 세배 냠네 저는 세배 깨고 딕 세배 규차도 아니 세배 깨디 가서데 너바데 뭐 바데 또 상자 와다 데 삼로탄 아니 소소라 지금 세배 냠네 지야라야 좀자 망아 삼로탄 데 제와이나 가자서네 아니 이 마대와 차에 쇼초다 존네 이 마대와 마잖아 아니 코도 뒤게 말와 와다 되게 저다데 심마제 깨쳐 버도 Soba konge la en konto sai juga samutam dera en soba yung kumarwa. Soba yapor la en soba chigna wacha lam jang konto sai juga samutam. Oh teacher tin nima chig mare sar mangbu yin sing ta. Oh mi mangbu me no osre mi mangbu kila lapso sing ta. Ta ko sar chig mare sar mangbu yin sing ta. Tene ke jumsa oh dikala pora nam ya ko min do sing ta jumsa mangbu samutam mai tu konto shu ya pa gedwa.
So here, pointing out really the necessity of adopting a very comprehensive plan and attitude towards the generation of a culture of patience in ourselves on the one hand, and then also really distancing the opportunity for any angry response within ourselves. And it really need to look into it from all different sides. As Master Shantideva has in his Bodhisattva's way of life, detailing many different aspects that we need to consider in order to promote patience on the one hand, and to distance the possibility of anger on the other. And so, really, we have to begin by really holding not just others, of course, as precious to ourselves, but the qualities of patience as something which is highly attractive to us. I've seen the wonderful benefits of the development of that sort of really comprehensive, all-pervasive kind of patience. And then seeing how and seeing this through kind of the reasonings that are presented from our own point of view, but also from the Bodhisattva's way of life. Seeing it as being something that is not a problem, to the point where it's not just not a problem, but our natural response is patience, and our natural response is never to give an opportunity to anger. And here it's showing how mindfulness and alertness are two indispensable allies in this regard. And as Master Shantideva pointed out, when it comes to counteracting anger, we need to be able to spot when it initially begins inside our system. And there's always this point of unease when somebody is talking very negatively about us, like in this verse, or speaking unpleasant words about us. There's always this kind of beginning point where we start to become uncomfortable somewhere in the heart and the chest area. And that here we need to be able to recognize this through mindfulness and alertness at the very outset, before it catches fire and turns into full-blown anger. And so this is a kind of a one point in saying, using all kinds of reasonings, like we spoke about before, to really ask ourselves sincerely, is this person acting so badly? Are they under their own control, or are they somehow out of control? Are they acting with freedom, or are they under the influence of their mental afflictions? And seeing this kind of seeing like, what's my own response when it comes to kind of criticism like this, or people speaking unpleasantly with regard to me? I mean, am I thinking, if this was a private conversation, I'd be able to handle it much better. But the fact that he's speaking out in a crowd and everybody else is hearing this, this is kind of like really over the top, and so I'm going to react with anger confidently. And to kind of really see again the faults of anger very comprehensively, as pointed out in the Bodhisattva's way of life and elsewhere, excuse me, and then reinforce the benefits of patience in our mind constantly, and that if it if something if I find something harmful and I react in that way, then I am harmed as well as the other person who is engaging in that harm, and that ask these questions, and again, like as Master David points out, if this kind of like reaction arises from me, then this kind of result, this kind of consequence is inevitable. If another sort of response arises in me, then another sort of consequence is inevitable. I must see that the causes that I am creating, or what is arising, are the causes for patience for me. And these causes to be seen as good, as something that's very, very important. That also, and to understand that if I am not really, very deliberately working towards the generation of patience, using all of these reasonings and all of my experiences and so on, then in place of that, like the way nature abhors a vacuum, then the causes of anger will definitely take root in there. So it's kind of like we have to be proactive in generating our patience, because if not, we know that the kind of causes for anger are quite prolific within us, and that they are kind of like constantly, there with us, because we'll spot the kind of like offense in another extremely quickly, whether they're, we kind of say, oh, this is this person who's constantly haranguing me, constantly critical of me, constantly showing me a sour expression when we're near. And so this is, we have to spot these kinds of judgments from our point of view as this is causing this unease, this discomfort that will then, blossom into the weed of anger in our system. And so this is at the level that we need to be operating at. So kind of really relying on our mindfulness and our alertness to kind of make these mini decisions and make them correctly each time, so that we are promoting patience, and that we are really eradicating anger.
我大概跟着他这个说法里头，他做你这个信仰慢慢的，俺没说，所以这个搞的是呢，今天去讲我们的，菜地改什么事呢？俺的把几万手脚，菜地改什么嘛？菜地的起码改什么这个只能得了，那手钱穷的做的，过他，俺说来，俺的一再讲的，你这个信仰嘛，这那么就买几把钱个多呢？ 세트를 숙청부 현자여바 그 딱선 세부 숙제. 안 소소를 익제제래. 직전 추게 숙제쪽 가제도 익제제래. 안 지속가 뭐 줘봤잖아. 주고 파주에만 주고 소소로 추주네. 안 남자 지금 대어 익제 식당도 삼삼전. 그래서 뭐 줘봤잖아. 야고도 왔고 어떤데.
And as well as this, if we have this sort of like a strong negative reaction to somebody, in this instance, speaking unpleasant words or making unpleasant remarks, then we have to admit that this is part of my immersion in the 8 worldly attitudes, and that what we need to adopt is the kind of mindfulness that says, this is a kind of a test of then how much I am bogged down in the 8 worldly attitudes, and that to what extent am I, really under the kind of influence of these 8 worldly attitudes. And this should be prompting enough to do something about it, because it sort of betrays a sort of whole attitude where we're still mired in the affairs of holding these things to be so important in this life, and we need to actually start to erode that kind of attitude as quickly as possible.
怎么对我说，感谢给是长的追寻，今年嘛那样得了几位新年，得了几位新年节， 텔라 게시 게베 시제 뒤세 제사 그것도 봐 제사 라리 있어요. 다 그거 잡고 저래 다 간자 조만 뒤에서 미망고 뒤에 위해서 라다 미망고 뒤에 위해서 요소 가시가 다 리가시가 안 소저 찬데 주어이나 소저 교가 찬네 다들 걸 뒤 요르스케네 주어이나 생게 마와이나 안 뒤다 소소게 가서다 지 교회들이 지주요 말이었으면 그 남자 지금 기회신이 그 명하다고 삼다고 해서 기회신이 그 두시에 기했었다 그게 좀 개설하니 있죠.
So verse number 15, which is covering some similar ground, which says, though someone may deride and speak bad words about you in a public gathering, looking on him as a spiritual teacher, bow to him with respect. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. And so here it's pointing out somebody who is like very deliberately numbering all your faults. You know, you have this and this fault, you have this and this fault, and so on. And that here it's saying that one must again be very, very aware of the dangers of reacting in an angry way, but rather here to look on him as a spiritual teacher, and that what he is saying as some kind of special instruction. And so bow to him with respect. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
창내 준에 창라 교도 여바 이나니 아니 교도 원래 제전에 아니 교도 세다저 오 다지 당화자고스 때 교도 여바 있는 소설 너그러 왔다 너그에 아니 거기 당화서 때네 안다 계획신이 그 두시 샨들 지가서다 마구 바다 안들 교주시에다 되게 안에다 온도 맞아 왔잖아. 다들 온도 전에 타메야 다다. 근데 온도 맞아 지금 다 계속 주변 남에 지금 차대로 와. 뭐다 계속 줘 말이야. 소화들이.
And so here we have, of course, it's clear that whatever that person is saying, if they are pointing out faults that you are very honestly and clearly aware that you do not have, then there's no issue. There's no fault there. No big deal. But if they are pointing out things that are definitely, shortcomings of yours, then automatically we go into really respecting them as somebody who's giving me really personal instruction, like a spiritual teacher, like my spiritual teacher, and to really bow to this person with great respect. And, this is again. The choice of our response is clear. If we fall for the good reaction of anger when somebody is pointing out our faults, then we have lost our mind in that respect. We've lost everything. But if we see it in this regard of their giving us something really precious in terms of like really personal instruction from a spiritual teacher, and then we bow to them with respect, and we don't lose our mind. We gain a great deal in terms of our practice of patience. This is the instruction of, or this is the practice of the bodhisattva. Verse number 16. Even if a person for whom you've cared like your own child regards you as an enemy, cherish him especially like a mother does her child who is stricken by sickness. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
소소 코로나 강에 제대로 가서 빼면서 야고 챘네. 다 코로나 빼 판도 챘네. 챘시죠지. 다 소소 잡아 강에 전에 소저와 요사지. 오늘 저와 잡나 그 저와 챘 투게 人家说有个真的没几个，俺说了呗，这个可说了他，这个可说了，可说了，他那么结束了，那15岁嘛多要吧？那么就这样也不每个人那么结那可15岁，那个人在那在咱们修改这么这个嘛的，人家说是怕也不100%也不结吧去，家他们也不结吧这个，他这把可能我是也不抢的，说刚才这都我的说我接触个没几个。那如果几个啥了，说那把钱那那什么样嘛？那真的这个那把钱嘛，现在要么想法就叫嘛是，那人家就不要，这要么想法就人家这样要嘛，那就什么样了？他就不是这样的，说不会那些这样讲的没，他说了这刚开始在这都说了真的是当不见的，大完钱那样，刚开始如果几个啥了呗，那把钱那样，啊你那就代表不了嘛现在他这个哪在个呗那差不多这什么？선택인 그 부지라 아니 더 남주도 미도 파마가 자와 지기로 와 왔다 지나 시전은 타바서래 다고 내 탑치고 아니 너무 위상화도 주는 제대로 아니 배지 내 탑치셔 뒤에 인사 아니 되고 트베 토는 코랄 부신도 아니 타바서와 아니 개설라리스 다 그거 되게 라야 되네. 코로나 라와 유네 제와 라와 메네 제와 녀모 제와 되게 그거 삼로 녀모 교원 되게 찾아지 셔봐이나 아니 들리게서 유시도 와.
So again, this verse now is really saying, putting this into even a more intensive situation, that where one has, being so kind to another and have great expectations of that other to behave in a good way, yet they do the very opposite. And again, they're saying it's not like, if you have somebody that you don't know well and they are very critical or they do something nasty to you, okay, it's something that you can, you feel the harm of it. But when somebody that you have really loved, like here is saying, like your own child, if they turn and betray you, then it really breaks your heart. And so this is the kind of scenario here. And again, as pointing out, this is very similar to a verse from the 8 verses from Mind Transformation by Geshe Konchok, which states, when one whom I have helped and of whom I have great expectations treats me with unkindness, may I hold them as my supreme guru. And they're saying here, it's kind of looking at this and saying, if a person for whom you've cared like your own child regards you as an enemy, and then you should cherish him like a mother does her child who is stricken by illness. This is the practice of Bodhisattva. And they're saying that you not just cherish him, but cherish him specially. And put more emphasis into the way in which you appreciate that person. So it's kind of very counterintuitive. And this is the way in which we train our mind in its most effective way. And so here again, it's looking in terms of the reasonings as presented in the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, chapter 6 as well. Is the person who is kind of like seeing me as an enemy, are they operating under their own kind of independent way, or are they under the influence of mental affliction? Have they operating freely, or are they under the influence of mental affliction? And so this is the kind of way in which you establish here what is the wise response in this regard. And it's really kind of like making it very precise in terms of, really adopting the attitude like a mother does her child who is stricken by this sickness. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
가가 저게 먹고래 빠달 가가 저게 먹고 당부 야고 시고 제치기 정리자 가자 가자 다 진짜 네가 자잖아 자되기도 와 다게 야고 시고 제 가자가 옆으로 됐대요
You can see how, this is not in a kind of like such a kind of like precise scenario that it isn't seen in our society. It's all over our society. We see it everywhere where you have lovers who are parted, we have partners who have become separated, husband and wife divorced and have become both an enemy to each other so easily because they can't see any part of this. And so this is very, very much something that we have plenty of opportunity to gain experience with in society as well.
또데 치게라 어스 인도하고도 치게라 다다 리카시게 디카소데 치게 미리 나로라 지금 ex husband ex wife 스티지라 엔젤메 칼라님도 세 어디 참부터 또서 어 에시아도 페제 미스베 카타고 말해.
Again, let's say is pointing out maybe there's something good to be saying about Western culture in this regard, where you often come across the ex-husband or the ex-wife who are still in contact and maybe even sharing food together and quite friendly. And you say if in Asia this is quite impossible. They say once you're divorced, that's it. You never want to see that person ever again.
어디랬다. 다 가이나 마이나 개치슈데 셈제임에 좀 쓸라 때네. 아니 딜라지 가서네 펜바 주베스타 아니 지금 가서 저 네베 셈마게지. 소설 네바이케와 이네 셈제임에 앉아 대대요 봐. 진짜 막게 셈제임에 앉아 대요. 소설 네바이케 마게 펜토 마도스게 내가 그렇게 찾지도 봐. 내가 그렇게 찾지도 봐. 이네 그 셈제임에 제라 닝지 유인기지. 셈제임에 제라 아니 저 가서네 소소 냠내 제대 뒤에도 지고요 맞지. 내가 소소 내게나 갈전에 뒤에 좀 말해. 개치지도 거라 셈제를 좀세 셈제임에 좀 생게 대화도 동에 밑에 말해. 근데 예사 내가 대화 좀다 동에 쓰다 지지. 뒤에도 아니 저 냠내 지고요 맞지. 저 냠내 지고요 맞지. 저기 남자 단데 임바 임사다 셈제 수 임바 이나야 아니 소소라 지 가서다 지금 팬토나다 뇌개바나 되게 너무想와도 맞죠 맞지 되게 최초에 튕겨를 줬도 맞지 제가 팬토와 이나야 소소가 섬을하고 맞다는 되사기로 와 되사기는 코에 교착을 해도 타바 탑리케 교착을 말어 와 아니 또 내가讲的 시험 먹어 봐 코에 교착도 시험 코에 동에 교착을 와但他感觉这个没的，讲究什么样了？身边他们三届国嘛，拖把切都已经把印章，啊你他的这个三届国嘛，马到个巴多，啊你去那一间那说吧，这个的尴尬，啊你三届国嘛准备就了别去当推去，但要么想法就觉得啊你就了结差的话，我他没有说的三届国嘛，你差挺多。
So really what's important in all of these kind of like scene scenarios is to really use the simple reason of that person being a sentient being enough to promote my practice. Their being a sentient being, my job is to benefit and never to harm. And so this is kind of like, seeing that all of the actions of sentient beings, whether beneficial or harmful, are just, temporary. They're like, the background temporary. But what's all underlying all of that is that in terms of my attitude, my attitude is to kind, mother, sentient beings. And so there's no question that there could never be any harm done to them. But always, they can never be a cause for me to kind of promote my mental affliction, to feed my mental affliction. But rather, they can only ever be a cause for to promote my spiritual practice. And that means to benefit sentient beings at every instance, if at all possible. But if not possible, never to engage in harm of sentient beings. And so, in the course of my, goal to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, I have to use all inner and outer conditions that I meet to be able to, proceed along that path continuously towards enlightenment. And so to use everything possible in order to reach that state of enlightenment where I can best be able to benefit sentient beings. And so that means always benefiting sentient beings, never engaging in any harm, of course.
But Narazu Sui by Rana Papa to Gurva, Rana Papa to Gurva, Jumse Gaza, Ran, Tinchimba, Ran, Sachimba, Jumse Marwa. Kursa Ran, Deva to go, Dume to go, Jumse Dimadu Yamarwa. Jumse Dimenda Meta, Jumse Di, Simja Tamjel Chipatawa. Simja Tamjel Chipata, Jumse Di on and the Papa to get. Deva to the Dume, Jumse Di on. And Deva to be Tukarisha, Tunga Tukarisha. What's that? And because nobody care that no let the pebble to go there, they want to make you vegetable yorba. Don't say to vegetable yorba. That no let the never care, that they want to give salad to her to go to one. To her and move to the Tunga to one. And here's that what that kind of church against the that chuma Chadra that did how good one.
So that because all sentient beings want happiness and do not want suffering is reason enough and reason complete for us to be able to dedicate ourselves to providing that benefit on the one hand and to really doing our best to remove the suffering on the other hand. And so kind of that's all that we need, really. That's all the proof that we need to be able to justify generating these mind training practices. And so in that sense too, all sentient beings are the same in that regard. They all want happiness. Nobody wants suffering. And so that's so important for us to be able to have that straight attitude deep down, very comprehensively in our attitude towards whoever, because they're all the same in that regard. And even harm that ensues or comes from sentient beings. Now, we have, again, the choice in how we are able to respond to that. If we respond with harm, then we know that is suffering. That is suffering for them, it's suffering for us, and it's perpetuating that suffering from time to time, from life to life. And so we can say, this is not a wise or healthy or clever choice to make. And so I would see any harm coming from sentient beings is transformed into something that is already going to be beneficial to my patient's practice. And so I am able to transform that harm into something which is very beneficial and to therefore never respond with harm, but always to respond with benefit to that harm. And that's another instance of sentient beings benefiting.
미디어 동에 동에 무슨 요약이다 유튜브 때 되는데 다 이제 유차되고 뭔가 말이 왜 생활도 전에 대화 되고 때 대화 juk 뭐마시 봐있어 아니 대화 요구요 말 대화 되고 때 동에 용 가서 juk 가서 속에 대고 요구여서 juk 동에 유튜브여서 난 동에 용되고요 대화 때 요구 말에 아니 대화 유튜브 마치 동에 요 아니 무슨 다 간자도 좀 때도 아니 지금 미디어시도 동에 무슨 용도 다 거다 이제 유차되고 마가와다 콘도사야 파샤는 닝제가 유차되기도.
And so again, all sentient beings wanting this happiness and not wanting this suffering, yet it's very clear to us that they are bereft of that happiness on the one hand, and they are inundated with suffering on the other. Therefore, from our point of view, they can only be an object of compassion. And that's so important for us. We must do whatever we can to be able to relieve them of that suffering and provide that happiness that they are so lacking. And that, to kind of also see that because they are firmly established as an object of compassion for me because of all this understanding I have around it, that there is no place in my mind for disliking sentient beings, no place in my reaction or response to for having anger towards those sentient beings. And they are an object of compassion.
So I'll leave
it there for today. But if you have any questions, please ask.
One question, Mudu.
No questions.
Tam never ina, and the drill at jealousy set up the what jealousy set up teacher, and what the chen set up teacher do that and judge what the chen, what the chen, and money changwachi changa, money changwachi chang.
So let's do some recitation of Mani Padme Hum mantra.
What the chen. Do la jealous come shadow, that in the channel, and there's some start. I can't judge Chaton College with Chendo Jawa, some of the color of Suba Cheddar, the charts again, and Nati Kavatos charts again, charts again, that jealous come to be in Sigi, and Nati Kavato, Ota, Pumbu the red wear, same the red wear, and delay much to get. That did it, and it dark judging. There is a child and money, but not money, but the color. Some Lenge Shan. Lenge Sha.
So to begin the kind of like recitation here, we visualize so the for younger somewhere
jealous come there, jealous come there to and that Egypt to me how so that jealous soon that solo catcher. Chaton College with Yaboto, Chendo Jawa, some Sanja Kalakan, the Super jealous charts and also Takaja jealous, Koson Quebec on the charts and what Takaja, the charts again, Nati, not. So that's jealous in Coma to be in Nati Kamato, Chevachen. Chevachi, the Lutheran to a same the red to a Yana Dili Shamash to wear. Chevacheto Taco, Nigamarba, call you tend to America. You tend to Chevachin and money what they call some tall shop. Kachaka something called some tall shop.
So then again, reciting that kind of the introduction to the recitation of the Mani Padme Hum mantra is simply an exhortation of prostrating through the body, space, and mind of Chen Rezi. And then we enter into a meditation on this I that is doing this body, speech, and mind prostration, this self, looking for that self, engaging in the meditation of searching for the objectively existent self within the body-mind, arriving at the point of simply not finding the object of negation and sustaining our focus on that simply merely not finding of the object.
What is tall shop, some tall shop.
Leaving our mind on that simply not finding of the object of engagement.
That was the Kushina, that was a Chua, was the number Chua, that Chua de and Chugu. Chua sort of some Chua de and Chugula Joso, what the Tomba some of the Chugula Joso, some talk. And then they get Chugu, the Tomba never lot in it. And work our talk on such some talk, work our talk on such. The Chua Chuguti, a part of Longul Pajoso, some such. Parto de Longul Pajo, Nambu Parto de Tameo Parto Madawachen, and Longul Pajoso, some such. Sabuka bought the Harris what Longul Joso, some. And then they work out with the talk on it, and Lama Cheresi, Chashi by the Chato Chendon, and the National Pajoso, some such. And Nambu normal Kiawati, my budget, and because of Kiawa to go. What in the Joso, what is the Kushik, some big down to now? Yabu, what in the chat?
So then, relating this to the different bodies of the Buddha and entering in through the mind now, which is still abiding in this meditation on emptiness, the lack of any objective existence of the self. From out of that, we enter into the wisdom, generate ourselves as the wisdom body of the Buddha, and through the death process. From that, then entering into the Bardo, the intermediate state, arising as the enjoyment body of the Buddha, and then through that, from the intermediate state into the next birth as the emanation body of the Buddha. And in the aspect of Chenrezig. So this is kind of like, again, operating at the level of our own imagination here, but this process of visualizing, through the emptiness into the aspects, say, here of Chenrezig as the wisdom body at death, transforming then into the enjoyment body of the intermediate state, and transforming again into the emanation body at rebirth.
Or the chance to the Juso such as what the chat. And the letter, what the chance of subject Tamjag on the understand combat to be sudden to be in something because of the new one you to be in some lot ya, then lot the largest complex and Ninga Kotola, directly what you saw some subject.
And so then through establishing the motivation, really working to attain the state of enlightenment as quickly as possible in order to benefit all sentient beings, arises the moon disk mandala.
And then and then they go like the and Dodge cover them about you so such.
And then from contemplating the self or the I, aspiring to attain that state of enlightenment to benefit all sentient beings, examining that self, reaching that point of merely not finding such a self, and abiding, focusing on that. From that then arises a white five-pronged Vajra.
What is it? What the Ninga Kotola, because the David Kimbocha and Dodge Coverson, the Tagoto, and all money payment homes. What did you?
And so this moon disk mandala is situated at our heart center, and the five-pronged Vajra is standing on that moon disk. And around the five-pronged Vajra circles the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra.
Around the Dundela, Lama Cheres, Tukale, Tawa Doji Tsanga, which you use some such. And the Tawa to Om Mani Padme Corte, which you use some such.
And the figure that we are visualizing in the space in front, the figure of Chenrezig, is similarly at the heart center with the white mandala disc and moon disk, and the five-pronged Vajra standing with Om Mani Padme Hum encircling it.
What is that?
And we again remind ourselves that we are surrounded by all kinds of other sentient beings.
What that is all money, and the because of the Tawa Dojitala, and the Mipaten, Tawa Dojitala, Mipaten, and the we said we said and because of all money, more part of member 20. And round the Rangus Tago the Magus and the Tawa Doji, all money payment, Tilapet. Tawa Rangu said the Cheres took a Tawa, Dojita, and all money payment, what the Kangali was a part of member 20. And around the Rangus Tamjag, Tawa, Dojita, and all money payment, not it, but Tim sounds bad. the discussion to something. What did the commission? Oh, money payment, oh, money payment, oh, money payment, oh, money payment. But there's what I'm watching.
And that once we begin the recitation of Omani Padme Hum, we see that the configuration of the moon disk mandala with the Vajra and the mantra at the heart center of Chenrezig begins to emanate countless versions of Omani Padme Hum mantra, writing on light rays coming from all three of the moon disk mandala, the Vajra and the mantra itself, and that they kind of like really rain down Omani Padme Hum mantras, which dissolve into the Vajra and the moon disk mandala that we have at our heart center. And indeed, this same configuration of moon disk mandala, Vajra, and mantra are at the heart center of all kind mother sentient beings all around us. And so they all avail of this rain of compassionate Omani Padme Hum mantra.
Oh yeah, 자동 걸론 주변 여워도 전도 여워 서서서도 걸론 관도 될라도 너와 좀 맞으려서 자제로 많이 Omani peme o mani 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 o mani peme 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 o mani O mani peme 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 o mani O mani peme 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 o O mani peme 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 o mani O mani peme 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 o O mani peme 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 o mani O mani peme 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 o O mani peme 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 o mani O mani peme 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 o mani O mani peme 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 o mani O mani peme 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 o mani O mani peme 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 o mani O mani peme o mani O mani peme o Gawandi nyudo da jeles wan to 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 chi ja ma le de sala ko
Oh, again, because Chio Chik Chung Song again.
Yeah.
The Damso Tuchin La, Chio Chik Tu.
Yeah.
Again, because me check Nala, for the Nova Sabo, the Chig Du. And in Gatokla, the Koranso or Ninjagi Sa Chik Tu, the Samlo Danga. Yenayang, ne dinner stunga. Then Koranso gi Joba Ducha di Yapo Chi Mandua. Also the Koranso di Yaptor and Samlo Ducha di Yapo Che Mandua.
Lord, that Kaja that social conduct Shawado Majuba Chen. Any winner done it to see Yakshu Karisha. Any Koralia, because the Mayo Tapchi do not any Tapchi. The social conduct Shawado Majuba, Ninja or the Telapemba want to check. That was that never teach the Karisha was Tango social no more get the Ketchup Yinza, Tikata, social no more the Majebe Kandela. And a Pajo de Lata, come to get Juna, cook up Judah, that is change. Timan Tanangara to get Chedade. Because the social condo is Shawan, the Jonah didn't have taught to a Yomare, the condo, a Pajo that never took share of them and the condo had taught to him. That is like, because the get the social condo is Shawan, the Majugo corner, and 갑다 뒤 가리 약슈를 샤 갑다 뒤 딱딱 매네 지금은 도와 콜레 닌제 오게 그래서 닌제 오게 저 가서는 reflection bet 로가이로 콘도가 샤완 reflection bet 로가를 나라도 통그래 나라도 통거요 말에 코랑게 통그래 코랑게 동 나라도 통그래 코랑게 통거요 말와 뒤에서 나라도 콘도 샤완도 맞아 저 시대 가래 요바이나 텐데 파조들 편도 텐데 요 그랬다 엘리 파게 마셔봐 있네 코랑게 코 파조도 미래 간sam서나 예 지금은 내가 깨봐 있는데 코랑 가라 내내 지금은 또 샘페 시대도 아니 간sam서 즉 계속 다니 전부터 미국으로 코레 데려와 좋아 그 네가서 파조 되게 내가 시에라 텐데 팽그래 네가 내가 딱 뒤다 깝딱다 이만하다 아니 거야 지금 지금 양 콜라 편도 치쇼 가르자야 지금요 점점요 지금으로 인지미 남주 약속돼서 인고 말이야 점점 걸어라 가서 봐봐 소소 컨디션 와도 맞게 왔잖아 아니 양 거들 용으로 왔다 깝다 뒤 가르자는 약사네 닌제기서 콜라 편바 빠지죠 랑이처럼 그거 가는 데가 뒤좀 잡아 있잖아 콜라 데 내가 사고도 딱 가리 약속돼 섭사처럼 진짜 용적으로 상도도 당분 내가 좀 맞게 거는 내가 이해 쪽으로 했다 그래도 내가 기억도 세네 되고 말와 내가 뭐요 탑시 가리는 지쪽으로 와 이나 딱 그때 내가 뒤 중에 탑시 매고 있나 아니 삼로 뒤땅 거를 숨 거를 막
So a question has arisen, Venerable Damcho, thank you. Venerable Damcho's question was, if someone is very harmful to you, but you take it on with compassion, are we not encouraging them to continue their bad ways? And so again, his response is here to say that timing is of extreme importance here. And the other consideration is to understand the kind of a more comprehensive responsibility of responding with compassion. Because here, when somebody is kind of in that sort of like a harmful mode and they're harming us, you have to be able to see the situation, respond with compassion. Compassion will tell you then first how best to avoid anger arising from our side as the most important component here. Also, one is able to ask the question, is this the right time to intercede and to kind of like really say something to them? Or should I wait until they're calm and they're no longer under the influence of their mental affliction? And it's often the latter case is the way to go. But one is simply not saying my kind of responsibility to a compassionate response doesn't finish when I remove myself from the harmful influence. I go back to that person and we kind of try to get to the heart of the issue, and from that really can maybe do more to change behavior. And the other thing is to not to underestimate a truly compassionate patient response. That you have, the thing is that you are seeing you're only able to see their expression, and they are only able to see your expression on the face, that is. And so if you're maintaining a very peaceful, composed facial expression, that is going to be noticed from their side. And they will be forced into thinking that I'm trying to rile them, I'm trying to get under their skin, but they're completely calm. Now, what's going on there? And again, you may, in that situation, say, maybe I'll wait, the timing is not right now, I'll wait till the right time, but then I have more of a footing in order to be able to speak to that harm later on, and they will have a better chance of understanding how, their anger and their anger motivated reaction or action isn't working for them. And so this is the kind of like the way it is. So we have that sort of initial guarantee that we don't ever allow the anger to dictate our response. and that we, through compassion, have both the immediate understanding to maintain our composure, and then the wisdom to know when is the right time to talk more directly to the harm.
다들 그나저거 서버 검단 내다 뭐 소에 되게 세워주고 해도래면도 셔라 그 좋아도 제와서다 다 셔라 그 좋아도 제가 돈을 요구도 와 셔라 그 좋아도 제가 돈을 요구도 와.
So again, they're saying with all of these. So again, they're saying with the compassion and patience and so on, they're not sort of isolated minds in themselves. That they are best when they are combined with the wisdom aspect of our thinking. And that he did mention something I didn't include initially. He's saying that if in a situation where you have somebody who is really raging with you, and that you feel that there's no opportunity, for reconciliation even later, then you have to simply be satisfied with your own compassionate response, a steady, compassionate attitude where you never lose your compassion for them. But you might have to say, there's nothing more I can do at this point.
다들 나라도 탐해와게 순녀밖에 없어 남자 내도 했다 되게 그다 소소가 가서 소소 샘침보여 봐. 그러나 두자를 파 두자 니라면 니 라비 있어서 아 디사마도 파조 좋아야 다 문에 팬도한테 요 말해. 다다다 잔주 셈에 남네 지다 제소 저도 허드드나 그게 갑대 맞아가 소리다 갑대 문에 니 자기도 와. 그 니바지 마요 뱅게도 와. 못들 마요.
So yeah, from our point of view as beginners, we often have a very clumsy sort of reaction when somebody harms us in any way. Really, we kind of almost kind of reach that what we think is the smart conclusion is to simply react in kind to harm, and that we kind of like we're left there where neither person is satisfied and both are harmed. From the Bodhisattva's point of view, they take a much more kind of like a comprehensive and in-depth attitude to what's going on. They see, the possibilities within the whole scenario, and they kind of like can see then what the best response is to give at the time, and then how to, or if it's possible, to follow it up later on.
And
also, yeah. It's very clear that anger in response to anger only creates more anger, more persistent long-term anger. It's like the old fuel to the fire sort of image.
Yeah, but the Rang Jensen Kato da Shen Jensen Yundesh Shiva like so the chick to that Chibuja Dada. Control Captain Pajo Condition Chan Kasana. Manda share the Chishu girls to the Chibuja, Mango share go, you must Naradu Captain Chata, Sagi Chomde, the Captain Chata Nila, Chapata, Sagi Chomde. Goodbye, Jim Drossar, why in the young Tadal Hart at one. Naradu Captain Chata, Captain Chatu, you want the Mutu in your not to Captain Chata. Tata all leaders to Captain Chata, Mango Benda Mango Sir, Laka Mango Sir, the day Captain Chata, your mother.
Yeah.
And teacher is shade they take off.
So then they're saying that we can really substitute the logic of what Shantideva talks about when talking about the subject of the faults of self-cherishing versus the benefits of cherishing others. That verse where he talks about there's no need to talk about this very much, and just look at the difference between ourselves and the Buddhas. We work for our own benefit. The Buddha works for the benefit of others. And look at the difference. He is now an enlightened, and we're still stuck here, kind of thing. And he's saying here, in the terms of anger too, it's exactly the same. We have to kind of calculate what benefit ever comes from responding to anger with anger, and it's just a mutual destruction. And there's never any reconciliation, any hope of reconciliation. And we unfortunately we see endless instances and examples of this through world leaders nowadays, where it's kind of like only a cause for the increasing of weapons and armory and then conflict, and then just mutual destruction. There's never any proper peace that comes out of that sort of policy. And so we have to see that too. It's a counterproductive attitude to have. And so we have to kind of say, we have to be able to see we must do better. We must have a better way of responding in all of these instances.
Well, so yeah, that was the what did it take the Lama Jersey and it doing the set of it and not doing a shit and run it to Pema the Nimata Davide, something that get your chance a young about and the Padres of Lama Tagitu of the Kusu would set of source, so that Jenna Tabucas of Pet, Nibacas show, so best of Tension, Sanjay Komamato, but the chairs for Yakushi, which also some such but and then that Pajajo. Then Marcasa the running Ninga de la Ning the Pema Tabjel could also tell Nimata Davide, Takan get your chance a young tower. What is it? What is it? But it's a number of telling of the kind of Kusu would set so Tabucas, Nibacas show, some attention, Sanjay Komamato, what the chairs for so what the Kobashi and then the Pema Tabjet in the sky. I'm just the Shisham what is it? And the take on the logic of Tsengabash. And then money payment, see you soon caught at dinner. And Omara was a natty, Omara was a natty, Omara was a natty, this. And then over yet on my head of travel, over yet on my head of travel, one which was diligent. And then they got so caught what did you tell and Lamacheres to show you some such.
And so then we begin the dissolution process, the ending process, visualizing again the figure of Chenrezig in the space in front, and first of all our invocation for them to come and take a prepared seat of a lotus, sun and moon disk mandala at our crown, arising from our contemplations of renunciation, wisdom, and the bodhicitta. And then we recite the invocation verse, "O glorious and precious Guru, come take a lotus and moon seed placed there on my crown. Keep me safe in your kindness, bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind." At the end of the first, they begin that journey. At the end of the second, they have arrived. At the end of the third, we have the certainty of their remaining steadfast until we attain the state of enlightenment. And then contemplating further, we set our own seat at our heart center. Again, the lotus leaf mandala seat, the sun and moon disk arising again out of renunciation, wisdom, and bodhicitta, and the invocation of so glorious and precious Guru, come take a lotus moon disk placed here at my heart, keep me safe in your kindness, bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. Again, at the end of the first recitation, the figure on the crown moves down through our central channel, and at the end of the second, they arrive at our prepared seat at the heart. At the end of the third, we have the certainty of their remaining steadfast until we attain the state of enlightenment. Then the petals of the lotus fold over and are sealed by a 5-pronged white vajra at the top, at the tip. And they are encircled on the outside. They are encircled by the mantras, the mantra of compassion, Om Mani Padme Hum, in a clockwise direction, the mantra of Manjushri, Amarapasanati, in an anti-clockwise direction, and the mantra of dependent origination again in a clockwise direction.
Go to the chat. And it's because of the lava cherry. We say to the Chivon, a country, and the Luke non-tager, we say China, that rang Lu, use the Tiva. And what Takaja, Chiba Hanamato, Rashi Hanamatomata, Setila Sava, Sengama Tema, Toma Mabal Sabe, and Tiba the Tiba, none more to substitute. To substitute and down the single and social church to be gay and the chicken listen Mateo condition when the dear Gama she watches some. And how don't know Takachi Nasa condition when the social man as a career by and the she watches some. And then down the single chicken, long tile last over and Yamjachi, you can't dig a so some. And how don't know 大概这牛的三节恐怕多完了，他们那些跟情绪的，他们那些跟他们这讲的，看到他这大把人家把些他都也不修中枢，是不是？我的是恐怕是。
So then we see how now light rays, kind of countless in number, begin to permeate the lotus leaves from the Buddha within, Chenrezig within, and they pervade our entire body from the crown of our head to the soles of our feet, and they completely eradicate and purify all negativities that we've accumulated since beginning this time, all negativities of body, speech, and mind. The negativities and obscurations that are holding us back, of those naturally occurring faults and negativities, and those that have been prescribed by Buddha and by vows, etc. And indeed, all the obstacles to our being able to engage in perfect practice, be it illness or disease and so on, the imbalances in our channels, winds and drops, the elements, and indeed, that which is kind of holding us back from being able to quickly attain the state of enlightenment, namely this adherence to ordinary appearance. Maybe get over that and be able to see everything in its pure realm appearance.
아니, 나서 가서는 소소 시도 터, 나서 소소 시도 터, 로드 년龄이지. 아니 가서도 라마체르스 고드 렌지 지금 채널 소소가 리드 라마체르스 콜 주소 소소 시도 터 세븐이 라마체르스가 토드 렌지 지금 채널 소소 셈데 라마샤자스게 아니 가서도 토라 주소 라게 루가 유소 라마샤자스 다 라마체르스가 루가 유소 뭐 예매 차소 선도 제 아니 내디야 내견 답제네 안 가서다 다 제르스게 아니 시작하게 줘서 선서 어디다 고바시 안디 대화도 대돈니스베리 시켜서 되는 고바시.
And then through the combination of my own most subtle winds with acting as the substantial cause, with the body of Chenrezig acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body transforms into the enlightened body of Buddha. And then through the combination of my own most subtle mind acting as the substantial cause, with the cooperative conditions of the mind of Chenrezig, my own mind is transformed into the enlightened mind of a Buddha. And now my body, speech, and mind become indivisible, inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of Chenrezig. And that also the place that I am in is transformed from its ordinariness into the palatial palace of an enlightened being. I experience a bliss which is combined with voidness, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
고르주에 투갈래 아니 저 왜세 빠도면 같은 다까지 저 가서 감소 심제 탐제라 왜세다 포함을 때네 아니 내 감소 심제 탐제 아니 라마체스다 뭐예 고소도 뭐예매 차소스 내다 탐제자 내가 교연 탐제 때네 다까지 제르스 시작하는 조소스 고마시.
And then seeing myself as the fully enlightened Chenrezig, I emanate from my heart center rays of light equal in number to all the sentient beings in all the 6 realms of existence. And as they are touched by these realms of light, they are again transformed into fully enlightened Chenrezig in Buddhas. The places are completely purified of all fault and transformed into pure realms. And I rejoice in the fact of having fulfilled that goal of it, leading all the sentient beings to the state of enlightenment.
다가제 감조 심제 단자 라마체르스 고르 주바다 고주와 대주베체도 아니 소소의 개와 가르 주바다 안 주가 소소서 유대는 말고 또왜 발다 잡래 공바시.
And that these 3 realms of existence, full of all the sentient beings, having been led to enlightenment, myself as the agent engaging in that, and the virtue leading into that reality, I realize that they are completely empty of any objective existence and are merely imputed by thought. From that arises bliss, combining with the voidness, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
我真的恐怕是，我当时想，大感觉这个说的，当的，是他这个当的没告诉的，大感觉这
I know that this is I'm performing this at the level of my own imagination and aspiration, but I make a strong dedication now that it may quickly become a manifest reality.
아니 대체도 다가네 대체도 아니 산지기 때마 다가제 동안이기 때마 디말 내바데 아니 지대 칸나 아니 배코 마동 바도 내바쇼 내비 주주와쇼 아니 디 진정적인 텐제 기본은 자원 저 소주의 텐제 기본은 고세대 제제 제바 아니 두개 세고 타다 두고 어디게 뭐지 어떻게
And that and in order for this to come about, I pray also dedicate that all of the wonderful teachings of method and wisdom disseminated by the Buddha may remain for eons to come in this world, and that all of the wonderful teachers, holy beings such as His Holiness, that all their holy wishes may be fulfilled also.
상해 컨디션을 경에 컨디션 차바이네 아니 디게 주나 동에 주나 내가 컨디션 차바이네 디게 탐제 담반제 장주가 셈다 돈이 또 미셔라 귤을 기베 아니 귤을 주어쇼 어떻게
And that in kind of really seeking to emphasize the quintessential importance of generating the mind of enlightenment, of the cultivating emptiness, that I pray that all of what happens, secret or open, bad, good or indifferent, I'll be able to transform all those causes and conditions into conducive causes and conditions for Dharma practice. Yang Lord, like this, shall Lord, You are Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of compassion, not aimed at true existence, and Manjushri, master of flawless wisdom, as well as Vajrapani, destroyer of hordes of demons without exception, Sankapa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snow, Yosandraka, at your feet, and make requests.